What exactly happens when we exercise? Tell us more about the blood flow, neurotransmitter.
So there's actually many different things, right? So first of all, when we exercise, we increase our blood flow, which means that you increase the amount of nutrients that get to the brain. And you also increase the amount of kind of basically trash from the brain that can be removed. So that is one thing. And you actually can also increase the vascularization of the brain itself. So you can increase the growth of blood vessels around the brain. It does influence things like the release of neurotransmitters. Dopamine is very important, which dopamine plays a role in many things. It plays a role in our movement. It plays a role in our ability to focus and pay attention. It plays a role in many kind of higher cognitive abilities. And you can increase the amount of dopamine that's released by aerobic exercise. Then there's also what's called neural growth factor. Neural growth factor plays a huge role in what I mentioned, kind of like the creation of new synapses. It also plays a huge role in the formation of new neurons. So even in the adult brain, we're still creating new neurons. And neural growth factor supports that as well. And the brain releases more neural growth factor when we're exercising, but also muscles release it, and then through the bloodstream, that makes it back to the brain as well.
Hi everyone, this is Alex Kahel here, and you are listening to BrainTea Podcast, where we help you reach new levels of productivity so you can live a happy and healthy life. I am very excited to welcome our expert guest today, PhD neuroscientist and professional triathlete, Lenny Ramsey. Lenny, thank you so much for taking the time to share this conversation with us.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
There are so many things to talk about today, from your focus on attention and decoding brain activities to what got you to become a professional athlete. Who doesn't like the comfy seat of a university office?
That's a good question. I think it actually was more on accident than anything else. I actually started triathlon while I was in graduate school, so during my PhD years. So as I was getting my PhD in neuroscience, I had been sedentary for quite a while. I grew up very active, physically very active, but I had some injuries. I tore up my knees when I was probably in my early teens. I played soccer. And I became sedentary. I didn't really do anything. I mean, I focused on school. Finally, when I was in graduate school, I had knee surgery. So I had my ACL repaired or replaced, and part of my meniscus removed. It took like 8 or 9 months of recovery. So it was a little bit of the long haul. After that, I remember seeing a physical therapist, and he asked me what it was that my goals were, what I wanted to do. And I told him, I'd like to play soccer again. And he just looked at me and he's like, you know what? Why don't we start with running? And I was like, okay, we'll start with running. And so this was all during graduate school. I was a few years in, and I picked up running, and it turned out that I really loved running. But I got injured a lot. And so I was like, okay, I need to balance it out. So I started taking swimming lessons. At this point, I was in my late 20s. Borrowed a bike from a friend, and I started cycling and met some people that were also kind of in that world. And through that, just kind of rolled into doing my first little triathlon and did a few that year and actually did pretty well locally.
It's amazing when we are passionate about something. When you have a goal, nothing is impossible. Like even when your physical condition was not supportive, you still went with it and actually mastered it and even won some races. I mean, from soccer to other sports, which was not planned, it just happened and you embraced it. As a result, it opened a whole new world for you, which is triathlons.
Yeah, once I kind of rolled into it, I think I had raced for 2 years before I won an actual bigger race. I won the half Ironman in Chattanooga. I won the amateur race, which allowed me to get my pro card. And initially, I didn't want to do it. So this race actually happened the week after I handed in my PhD thesis. And the week before, I had to actually defend it in front of my committee.
That's amazing.
So I had a race right in the middle. But I had been pretty structured in my training because as I was writing my thesis, I would get up in the early morning, I would go swim, and then I would either go to lab for the full day or I would go to a coffee shop and write all day. And then at the end of the day, I would have a bike ride or a run to look forward to. So I did that to kind of wind down my day. And so that gave me structure. And so I really did really well at that race. Unexpectedly, I didn't know that I was going to do really well, but I won that amateur race. But I also in that time, I had accepted a job up in Wisconsin to teach at a liberal arts college. And so it was a lot going on. So I wasn't ready to make the jump to the pro field. But then later that summer, I won another race, and I was like, okay, I don't want to be winning races. So I decided to take my pro card, and in 2017, I started racing as a professional athlete. It takes some commitment and balance and a lot of scheduling, especially with having a full-time job as well. But I love it. I love every bit of it.
It takes a lot of dedication and focus, but I know mindset is a key here. I mean, I always work on building the right mindset to inspire my actions and the way I get things done. And I know when I push forward in one area, it reflects on all aspects of my life and other areas as well, whether in my studies, in my business, or my relationships. Do you think that this mindset you adopted through your training benefited you in your work and studies as well?
Oh, for sure. And as I said, to me, it gives a lot of structure. I think I do better when there's at least a little bit of pressure. That keeps me focused. When I'm training, I don't think about work. And when I'm working, I don't think about training because I have my day planned.
We know through all studies that exercise has the most transformative benefits on the brain. Can you tell us more about this? For example, how can exercise affect neurotransmitters and neuroplasticity?
So there's actually a lot that happens. So I'm personally fascinated with neuroplasticity, which is why when I did my PhD work, I looked at stroke patients that had a stroke and how they recover over time. Which neuroplasticity is just the flexibility of the brain, the ability of the brain to heal, but also the ability of the brain to learn, which is a big part of our plasticity in every human brain. After we're born, in our early years, the brain is very flexible. As we age, it becomes less flexible, partially because we don't want to lose what we've already built up, right?
So the main reason why we have less neuroplasticity as we get older is to retain what we have learned before. That's very interesting.
So we keep on adapting. We keep on making small edits, but it's really hard to make big edits. But that's also why, for example, if you've created a habit over many years, it's really hard to change. Right? But it is possible. And as adults, we still can learn and we can make changes to our brain. And that's what we're doing constantly while we're learning. When you exercise, you actually make your brain slightly more flexible. So there's a bunch of chemicals in the brain. So there's neurotransmitters, but there's also a bunch of support chemicals that allow the brain to be more flexible. And a lot of it has to do with the creation of new connections between neurons. So neurons are the cells in the brain are all very highly connected to each other. And that's through synapses. And these synapses can constantly change. So you can create new synapses, you can strengthen synapses, you can weaken synapses. So the more you use something, the stronger it gets, and the less you use it, the weaker it gets. And that is constantly happening in the brain, and that is what learning is to us.
So what exactly happens when we exercise? Tell us more about the blood flow, neurotransmitters, neurogrowth factor.
So there's actually many different things, right? So first of all, when we exercise, we increase our blood flow, which means that you increase the amount of nutrients that get to the brain. And you also increase the amount of kind of basically trash from the brain that can be removed. So that is one thing. And you actually can also increase the vascularization of the brain itself. So you can increase the growth of blood vessels around the brain. It does influence things like the release of neurotransmitters. Dopamine is very important. Which dopamine plays a role in many things. It plays a role in our movement. It plays a role in our ability to focus and pay attention. It plays a role in many kind of higher cognitive abilities. And you can increase the amount of dopamine that's released by aerobic exercise. Then there's also what's called neurogrowth factor. Neurogrowth factor plays a huge role in what I mentioned, kind of like the creation of new synapses. It also plays a huge role in the formation of new neurons. So even in the adult brain, we're still creating new neurons. And neurogrowth factor supports that as well. And the brain releases more neurogrowth factor when we're exercising, but also muscles release it, and then through the bloodstream, that makes it back to the brain as well.
So this is what is referred to as neurogenesis, right?
That's the formation of new neurons, yeah.
So exercise and learning new things are the main factors for that to happen, right?
Yeah. Both exercise and staying mentally active, so physical and mental activity.
So if I'm staying mentally active, I'm learning new things and I'm learning novel things, and but not exercising, I'm missing out, right?
I think you're missing out. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a benefit, right? But you can do more by adding in exercise. And I think aerobic exercise can look different for different people. It doesn't mean you have to go for a really hard run every day, right? It can be maybe 3 to 4 times a week, at least half an hour is generally what's prescribed. But you can go for a walk, depending on kind of what shape you're in, what you enjoy doing. You can go for a walk, you can go for a bike ride, a swim, you could do a group exercise, right? I mean, whatever you enjoy, because adding the joy to it only adds benefit. So I always believe that motivation is a huge player as well.
So if I have a lot of decisions to make and I'm studying, or I have like a lot of I need to engage my brain in a lot of activities and a lot of decisions to make, exercising will make it easier for me, right?
Yeah, I think you'd be more effective, right? So first of all, we can only focus on work so many hours at a time, right? Probably not even so many hours. Maybe like, if you're actually productive, maybe an hour max, right? So it's good to take little breaks. And exercise is a good place to reset. I think, I like sometimes getting in the middle of the day when you feel that kind of like that energy dip coming in. Go for a little walk, go for a run, something that gets your blood flowing, that gets you more active, and then you'll be able to focus again afterward. And it's been shown that right after you do a bout of aerobic exercise, that actually benefits your ability to focus and pay attention and memorize things.
Does the intensity of workout play any role?
So you want it to be intense enough that you do get somewhat of a workout in, right? You want to get that heart rate up and get yourself moving. You don't want to be it to be so intense that you are completely fatigued afterwards to the point where you can't focus or pay attention. So there will be a trade-off where you overdo it. I think that's with everything. Balance is always kind of key.
It is not easy to decide when you had enough exercise. For example, when I start running and I get that energy elevated, I found myself doing between 10 and 15 kilometers more without even resting. That's why I actually also damaged my knee in a marathon I did a few years ago. And I was inspired by how you recovered from your knee injury. I don't seem to have balance in my exercise routine, as you said.
The body is complex. It's and I get injured pretty to the point where I can't run for probably 6 to 8 weeks, at least once a year, which is frustrating. I've been lucky to the point that I've always gotten back healthily, been able to get back in a healthy manner, and never had any lingering issues. I have worked with many a physical therapist. I have seen many a doctor, and thankfully I've always been able to recover well. But running is hard on the body. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite part of the triathlon. It's the part that I'm best at, but it is also the part that is hardest on the body. So I always have to be very careful with it and try to limit it. I spend a lot of time on the bike because it's much safer for my body.
Yeah, I'm really inspired by what you say. I will integrate biking and swimming and get my body to be more balanced. And I actually love biking and swimming. I think it would add endurance and more joy to my daily routine.
Yeah, and I think the bike is great because it keeps your aerobic base, right? So even if I don't run for 6 or 8 weeks, I can usually pick running up pretty quickly.
Because of the bike.
Just because because of the bike, exactly. So I have that endurance still built in.
How do you adapt, by the way, your training with, for example, bad weather or like the recent circumstances of quarantine? Do you use indoor equipment?
So the bike that I use outside on the road, I also use inside on what's called a bike trainer. It's actually an electronic trainer. It automatically can adjust the resistance. So I use a computer program that gives me a route with hills and stuff like that, and it adjusts the resistance for me. So it's almost like riding outside, but then inside.
In your studies, you focused on recovery after stroke. Can you talk more about your most important findings and the lessons you learned?
So we looked at how different brain areas communicate and how that changes right after a stroke, and then how that kind of recovers as behavior in patients recovers as well. And so it's most often caused by a blood clot. Sometimes it's caused by a bleed. But generally it's in the brain. It's not always, but often it's a lifestyle disease. So unhealthy lifestyle actually increases your risk of having a stroke.
Like what?
Being overweight, drug use, diabetes, high cholesterol, those kinds of things are primarily what.
Would alcohol play any role in that?
It can. Yeah. And these are all just added risk factors, right? So they just increase your risk of having a stroke. And once you've had one, you're at a much higher risk of having another one. I
see. Is there a way to reverse that or prevent it from happening in the future?
Yeah, healthy lifestyle, changing your food, being physically active, that kind of stuff.
This could reverse the damage that was caused by the stroke?
That depends on the stroke. If you have a very minor stroke and you make a full recovery, then exercise will help you recover. It won't necessarily reverse it, but it might improve the amount that you recover. So what you'll see in a stroke patient is that right after the stroke, you actually see an increase in plasticity of the brain. So the brain is trying to fix itself. But this lasts likely for about 3 months. So for those first 3 months, you really want to make sure that you do everything you can to help the body regain its lost function. And, for small strokes, kind of depending on where they are, people make a full recovery. For larger strokes or strokes that are kind of deeper in the brain, sometimes you might not fully recover. But, it's always worth it through physical therapy, speech therapy, anything like that to support that recovery as much as possible, especially in those first 3 months. And then after that, it's important to maintain because especially in older populations, if you become more sedentary, you'll start to decline a little bit quicker due to the damage that has already been done to your brain. So staying active is even more important.
Oh, I see. Do you think someone in their 60s, for example, my mom, after having, 5 kids, she tries to stay active as much as possible. But I always feel she could do more. Do you think it is possible for her or anyone who's listening at her age, at the same age, if taking exercise seriously actually increases their brain health and even at this age?
100%. So when you age, being physically as well as mentally active has been shown to decrease the aging of the brain, the process. So as we get older, we lose neurons in the brain. So you get somewhat of a shrinkage of the brain, and the brain becomes less plastic, so a little bit less flexible. The more you are physically and mentally active, the more you kind of postpone and decrease the speed of that decline. And it doesn't matter at what age you start being physically and mentally active, you will always be able to kind of decrease the slope, basically. So decrease the speed of decline. And it's been shown to help with postpone the effects of things like dementia as well.
Is there a timeline for the effectiveness of the exercise? For example, if someone haven't trained for 2 years and they just started to train right now, when would they see the results or the effect of the exercise?
There have been studies that have shown that one bout of activity, right after that, you can already see a little bit of a difference.
Immediately.
You'll see small changes right immediately, right? So you'll get small changes in the neurotransmitter release and that kind of stuff right after a bout of workout and your ability to focus and stuff like that. And you'll see long-term effects if you keep doing it, and those long-term effects will be increased by doing it long-term. I don't think there's a specific timeline for any of it. I think just being consistent in the end is most important. So, you don't have to work out every day. You don't have to do something really hard every day, but focus on 3 to 4 times a week doing something.
If you are working or studying and you want to be productive, do you think there are better times than others to exercise?
I think people are very different, right? I think you generally probably don't want to do it right before you go to bed, just because it'll make it harder to sleep. And I also, if you talk about the components to keep the brain healthy, exercise, and both physically and mental exercise, and sleep are some of the key components to keep the brain healthy. So you don't want to necessarily negatively influence your sleep, especially not if you're a person that's busy and has a full day. So I would do it earlier in the day than that. So either early morning, or if you can do it, swing it middle of the day when you're feeling that energy dip. That's always a good time to do it. The best way to do these things, I think, is to build it into your rhythm so that you have a habit of doing it and that it's kind of a similar routine every time. That just makes it much easier for you to do it. Building habits is something that highly effective people have been shown to use. It just takes away the making the choice. It takes away kind of the barriers of having to decide every day, well, am I going to do this today or am I not? No, you're just going to do it because it's part of your rhythm. And it feels natural to do it because it's part of your rhythm. So I would say find a time that you know you can maintain over the next few weeks, and kind of build that into your schedule.
Yeah, usually starting from zero is a little bit intimidating and difficult, but probably until you start kicking your endorphins and get this little addiction, you won't take it seriously.
Yeah, there's actually been studies that have shown that if you take people that are sedentary, so they haven't worked out in a long time, and you get them to do some form of a workout, if they actually are enjoying themselves during the workout, they are much more likely to still be working out 6 or 12 months later. If they don't enjoy themselves during the workout, but they feel good about themselves after the workout, they're still very likely to not maintain it.
So find a workout that you enjoy, a sport that you enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, change it.
Exactly. And that might be because it's, if you like the social interaction, find a friend and do something together, right? It doesn't always have to be very highly focused or something. It can be at the gym and sometimes the accountability of having a group of people to do something with can be very useful. So I think there's all these little tricks to kind of get yourself to maintain. But I think the key is to find something that you are able to maintain over longer periods of time.
I love it when you say that you have a coach, and how important it is to be held accountable, whether it's a training buddy or a coach.
When you're racing at my level, almost everybody has a coach. But for me, it's not just important because they kind of keep me on track and they kind of help me build towards my races and make sure that I'm not overdoing it, right? But also because I get the schedule, it's much easier for me to manage, because I just look at my schedule before the week starts and I plan my whole week out. But whenever I don't have to get up in the morning and be like, I'm going to go for a swim. What am I going to do when I get to the pool, right? My swim is already written out. I just have to follow the instructions. And the same for the run. Before I had a coach, I knew I was supposed to do like speed work for running, but every morning I would get up and I would go out and I'd be like, I'm just going to go for the same run I do every day, because that was easy, right? And so now with a coach, I don't even have to think about it. It's right there. I don't have to plan anything. I have to plan my day, but I don't have to plan anything for the workout. So it's just all right there and I just execute.
If you could choose one sport that is not physically challenging, healthy for the joints and the muscles, and has positive impact on brain health and mood, which sport would it be?
It's hard to answer that one, right? Because I think, for example, swimming is a great sport because it's a sport that you can do throughout lifetime. Like, it doesn't matter how old you get, you can still swim because it's much easier on the body. But it can be a really hard workout too, so it's good for the body. But it is a high threshold to get started with swimming because it takes a lot of time to become somewhat good at it. And I think it's hard to start.
I see.
Yeah. But with some good help, like working with a coach or with a trainer or someone that can really help you learn how to swim, it can be a lot of fun. Biking is a lot easier. And what I like about the bike is that you can go outside. And I personally think that there's also something to be said for spending time in the outdoors.
What could be the possible injuries you get from biking if you overdo it?
I mean, you could fall over. Right? People have bike crashes, and that's usually where things really go wrong. You can get minor injuries on the bike, both knees and ankles and stuff, but that's usually because you're not properly fitted to your bike. So I would always recommend going to your bike shop and having someone at the bike shop look at how you fit on the bike so they can adjust the saddle height and all that kind of stuff to make sure that you're not going to injure anything. And then I think the likelihood is pretty low that you are going to injure something, except if you fall over.
Lenny, what is the most valuable advice that we can give our audience today, right now, to change their life and get a healthier brain?
One, start exercising. Start easy. It doesn't have to be, a big hurdle, but maybe start by going for a walk 4 times a week. And then maybe at some point, if you feel comfortable with that, turn it into a walk run. I think a lot of people back off because they try to run really hard, really fast, really quickly. And that's not going to be sustainable. And you're much better off running slowly, very slowly, and walk running until the point that you can kind of maintain it. There's a lot of plans online, for example, that are called Couch to 5K. And that's a great place to start because they will show you how to slowly build it up and not want to run that 5K tomorrow. And so I think that is huge. Getting enough sleep is the second one. Make sure that you sleep. Sleep is absolutely essential for the brain. And sleep loss over time will damage your brain. And then number 3, I would say nutrition. Just make sure that you eat somewhat healthily. The brain relies on it because the brain can only do what it gets, right? And then overall decreasing stress. Little bits of stress are good, right? It's good to challenge yourself. It's good to challenge your body. It's good to challenge your mind. But overly stressing the system kind of leads to the point where you actually lose that flexibility of the brain. And it hurts you in terms of your memory and your ability to focus.
Yes, absolutely. So exercise, sleep, and nutrition, that's also an important one. Which food do you think we should eat and which one to avoid?
I think it's just important to eat a varied diet. So I'm not going to say that you have to eat one thing specifically. I don't necessarily believe in the magic bullet, right? I think it's all about balance.
What not to eat?
What not to eat? Highly processed, highly fried food. But it's kind of what's healthy. Generally, what's healthy for your body is also healthy for your brain. So have a varied diet that's not very high in sugar, not crazy high in salt, just because it's just not. We eat too much salt generally, and not very high in bad fats, right? So highly, like a lot of fried food is probably not great for you. Doesn't mean that not every once in a while you can enjoy yourself a donut or fried something, but that should probably not be something you do every day.
You said something very important, and I like it that you did not recommend particular diet because I study this in nutrition as well, which is bioindividuality. My food could be your poison. Each one have a different food that their body react to, and they absorb nutrition differently. So
For sure.
This is amazing. What about fat, and what about the brain that loves fat and all of that?
I think in terms of just evolution, when food is scarce, things like sugars and fats are things that we want, except for the fact that they're not scarce and we can get them wherever we want. So now we're kind of overindulging in all of that. And healthy fats are good, right? Like having your olive oil and stuff like that, like and your things with omega-3s and stuff like that in it, like that's essential for your brain as well. So it's not like we want to cut all of that out either. So again, I think a balanced diet will get you all of that.
How many meals do you eat a day?
So my standard day would basically be that I wake up. I generally eat carbs right before workouts because they're the easiest on the system to process. So your system can use them. So as soon as I wake up, I generally have some toast with a banana, and then I go swim. I swim almost every day, first thing in the morning.
In the morning?
Yeah. And then after that, when I get home, I'll have another breakfast, which is usually something with oatmeal, but with a lot of protein in it. And then I'll start work, and usually I'll eat about every 2 hours or so. So in the middle of the morning, I'll have usually an apple and eat something like an egg or something like that. For lunch, I have a salad, usually with some tofu-based protein on it, and a bunch of different things, different greens and some peppers and whatever I feel like on it. And then in the afternoon, again, I'll have something of fruit plus something with protein or fat. So that can be nuts or something like that. And then usually when I get home, I'll have another workout. So I'll have something small that is carbs. So maybe like a crunchy granola bar or something like that, or a piece of toast. I'll do my workouts and then I'll have dinner after that. And then before I go to bed.
Workout twice a day?
Yeah, 2 to 3 times a day.
2-3 times a day. Amazing.
Yes. And then before I go to bed, I'll have usually some, at this point, I usually have vegan yogurt or vegan kefir with some granola and protein, because it's when you work out as much as I do, having protein right before you go to bed, that helps your recovery overnight. And then I drink tea all day, and sometimes a little bit of coffee, but I react pretty strongly to caffeine, so I try not to overdo it.
It's amazing. And you do all these activities and you don't need caffeine?
I use caffeine when I race, always.
but not in your daily routine. I'm amazed with people who have this addiction to caffeine.
Yeah, it's a habit and it's an addiction for sure. I go in phases. Sometimes I'll go through a little stretch where I have a cup of coffee in the morning, and then I'll go through months that I don't. Then I often drink green tea. I don't necessarily drink coffee for the caffeine. I just really enjoy coffee.
I quit caffeine a few years ago. I was working long hours and pushing myself for extended period of time, and gradually increasing the amount of caffeine I consume until I eventually crashed badly from stress accumulation. So I decided to shift my life completely, and caffeine was the first thing to completely quit.
It's actually interesting that you're bringing this up, because I used to drink more coffee. I didn't start drinking coffee until grad school. And then once I hit the coffee boat, like I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I started drinking coffee, and I started drinking a lot of coffee. But then as I started working out more, so I got more and more serious about my training, I actually noticed that it made me overactive, that I couldn't focus. I got to the point where I would just nonstop talk and couldn't actually focus on my work. So I actually had to cut coffee out because I was starting to work out more. And right now it's winter, so my training load is a little lower, and I can do some caffeine. Once my training picks up, I generally kind of automatically decrease on my coffee because the caffeine makes me uncomfortable.
Yes, definitely. We always have to be aware of our habits and try to educate ourselves of what is good and what is bad for us. Thank you so much, Lenny, for this call. Is there anything else that you would like to add from your own experience?
I think those are the things that I mentioned are kind of the big things that I focus on. I make sure that I get my 8 hours of sleep a night. Otherwise, I don't function, both physically, like in terms of workouts, I don't function, but I also don't function in terms of mentally, in terms of being able to focus. So both of those, my sleep schedule is really important. And that might be, and part of that is because I ask so much from my body that it's more noticeable. But I think it's the case for everybody. Like, focus on planning your day out so that, even if you do drink coffee and stuff like that, do it in the morning so that it doesn't affect your sleep later at night. But other than that, I think just in general, like with everything, I think balance is where it's at. Find a balance between everything.
Balance, exactly. This is something we improve along the way, and it always changes according to our individual circumstances. The key is to be aware and open to learn about our uniqueness as individuals and the bio-individuality, the differences between our biological bodies. How can people find you, by the way?
You can find me on my website, lennyramsey.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, Ramsey_Lenny.
Absolutely wonderful. I will also share your handles in the description below the video. Thank you so much, Lenny. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope you got some great value and you enjoyed this video. Please support our mission in raising awareness of mental well-being by sharing this video with your family and friends. And please like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to be able to receive and watch our new videos.